Hello, kiddies. This evening we travel back in time. It's the 1st century BC, and the first triumvirate has fallen apart. Julius Caesar had become a powerful military commander by the end of the Gallic War, a war where Caesar had put down Vercingetorix at Alesia. Rome had been in chaos due to tribunes and their thugs battling it out in the streets. The one thing that held Caesar and Pompey together was Julia. She died in childbirth in 54 BC, severing Pompey and Caesar's ties. Furthermore, in 53 BC, the third of the triumvirate, Cassius, had an ill-fated Parthian campaign where he died at the Battle of Carrhae, leaving just Caesar and Pompey as the two left of the first triumvirate. Then in Rome, Clodius, a senator, died, leaving Caesar and Pompey as Rome's two most powerful men. And during Clodius's funeral, a riot broke out with the Senate building being destroyed. And in a desperate plea, the Senate made Pompey sole consul, giving him an unbelievable amount of power. Executions were held, soldiers marched into Rome, and order was finally restored. Pompey was then given the governorship of Hispania, as well as powers that rivaled Caesar's in Gaul. But Pompey had seen he had gained the support of the Senate and the Optimates, and he wasn't going to give up such power by leaving Rome. So he left 3 legates in charge of Hispania. Julius Caesar was the current leader of the Populares in the Senate, and Caesar had become a threat to Rome and might march on Rome, so thought the Senate, with his legions. Caesar had 10 battle-hardened legions under his command, legions loyal to him. In the past, Sulla marched on Rome with only 6 legions. The Senate and the Optimates turned to Pompey to take care of Caesar, who they thought had become too powerful. Caesar had immunity due to being a governor, and they knew they couldn't beat Caesar on the battlefield or with votes due to Caesar's popularity with the people and leading the Populares. The Senate, led by Cato, pushed for Caesar's resignation, but Curio and Mark Antony, both plebeian tribunes, blocked and vetoed such legislation against Caesar. The Senate insisted Caesar's term as consul ended in 50 BC, ordering Caesar to relinquish command, but Caesar was no fool. He refused, knowing if he did, the Senate would put him on trial. Besides, his governorship was legal through 49 BC. Pompey offered to resign his post if Caesar would, but neither did, leading to Caesar to march to Ravenna with 1 legion, where he wrote a letter pleading to the Senate. Rumors, though, spread that Caesar had 4 legions with him instead of just 1, prompting the Senate to have Pompey amass legions to protect Rome. But Caesar was still trying to negotiate with the Senate and Pompey. Caesar even agreed to give up all powers except his governorship of Illyrium, and even agreed to go down to only commanding 1 legion. And this is a good deal for the Senate, limiting Caesar's power. Even Pompey agreed to these terms, but Cato and a few other hardliners refused. The Senate then passed the Senatus Consultum Ultimum, an unvetoable bill giving all powers to the consuls, who then gave their power to Pompey, giving him full control of the Roman Republic. That same day, Caesar's allies fled to Ravenna to join Caesar, setting the stage for Rome being plunged into civil war. On January 10th, 49 BC, Caesar, his allies, and the 13th Legion marched to the Rubicon, a small river that marked the line where no general was allowed to cross with legions, or they were an enemy of Rome. Caesar sat there for a day contemplating, then alia iacta est, the die is cast. With his usual swiftness, Caesar took a few important locations in northern Italy, only taking a few days to accomplish this. He then ordered his Gallic legions to march south to join him. His moves caused mass confusion in Rome. Pompey didn't know whether to protect Rome, go out and fight Caesar in Italy, or abandon the Italian peninsula altogether. Pompey did not know Caesar had only one understrength legion, though Pompey had the 1st and 15th legions. The 1st legion being loyal to Pompey, but the 15th being formed by Julius Caesar, and their loyalty was questionable. Pompey thus abandoned Rome. He had provisions to fight a lengthy war. Pompey then made enemies of many of his supporters. He even left the treasury of Rome unprotected, securing Caesar could easily move in and take it. But Caesar was also having issues, mainly with his right-hand man Labienus, who disavowed Caesar and joined Pompey. Labienus knew Caesar's tactics and was a very capable general. But Caesar's legions still followed Caesar, not Labienus. And with the 8th and 12th already crossing into Italy at the time to join Caesar, Pompey was incapable of raising new legions, but one of his men took it upon himself to take 30 new cohorts to meet Caesar at Corfinium. But when Caesar arrived, he had 3 battle-hardened legions at his back, which promptly made the cohorts surrender without a battle being had. The cohorts were then formed into Caesar's 15th, 16th, and 17th legions. The leader was allowed to leave, and Caesar's leniency spread throughout Italy, swelling his army even more when he was able to form the 18th, 19th, and 20th legions on the march. Pompey, knowingly outmanned and outplayed in Italy, moved to Brundisium, preparing to abandon the Italian peninsula altogether, sailing for Greece to meet up with his loyal Eastern legions and many allies in Greece. Caesar caught up with Pompey in Brundisium, besieging the city, and attempted to halt any naval activity out of the city, but Pompey had already evacuated half his army to Greece and was able to ship out under Caesar's clutches himself one night. Pompey arrived in Thessalonica, sending envoys to client kings, gathering legions and foreign auxiliaries to his banner. In 3 months, Caesar had claimed the Roman peninsula, but hadn't ended the war due to Pompey fleeing to Greece, where his actual power base was. Caesar decided to protect his flank by defeating Pompey's loyal Hispania legions before going after Pompey and not be trapped on the Italian peninsula. Besides, he had to wait for enough ships to be levied to sail to Greece. Anyway, Caesar marched to Spain, while his allies took Sicily and Sardinia, preparing to march through North Africa. When Caesar's armies arrived at Massilia en route to Spain, the city was closed, waiting for Pompey's men. So, not wanting to be held up, he left 3 legions under Trebonius to besiege the city and left his naval force in command of Decimus Brutus, a skilled naval tactician. Caesar continued to Spain with a token 900 cavalry to meet up with Fabius, whom Caesar had sent ahead with around 3 legions to gain some control in Spain. Another couple of legions joined Fabius, boosting Caesar's vanguard to 30,000 legionnaires, 6,000 auxiliary, and around 6,000 cavalry, all battle-hardened soldiers from Gaul. The Pompeian forces were no less formidable, led by 3 of Pompey's legates, Marcus Varro, Lucius Afrianus, and Marcus Petreius, with Afrianus and Petreius having 30 years of military experience each, and commanding 27,500 legionnaires, 8,000 auxiliary, and 10,000 cavalry. Varro would be in further Spain with 2 backup legions. The Pompeians had a strong encampment outside of Ilerda on the west side of the river Sicoris, thus forcing Fabius to build 2 bridges 6 kilometers apart, crossing to also encamp on the west bank. Scorched earth had left nothing for Fabius to forage on the west bank, so he had to forage on the east bank, and skirmishes were constantly happening over there on the east bank. Caesar arrived in June, with his bodyguard quickly taking over and taking the offensive. Caesar quickly moved forward, dug trenches to start a fortified camp in front of the Pompeian line. Having successfully created a new forward camp, he moved all assets forward to this new camp. Caesar concentrated on a mound between Afrianus and Ilerda, hoping to cut off Afrianus' supplies from the town, a tactic he used against Vercingetorix. Both armies charged the mound. Fiercely fighting ensued over the mound. Eventually, the 14th Legion on Caesar's right flank began faltering, and the 9th was sent to reinforce the 14th. Afrianus retreated to high ground, and Caesar's 9th pressed the attack and were cut off for hours. The two armies then went back and forth. Caesar, though, lost the day, with Afrianus holding the high ground and Caesar failing to meet his objectives. And to make matters worse, a storm destroyed both built bridges, cutting Caesar off from his supplies. Caesar then changed tactics, having small boats built to carry a detachment upriver, crossing and fortifying a small hill on the eastern bank. He then sent a legion to construct a bridge, and being helped by the east bank detachment. Once finished, Caesar was able to bring in his Gallic reinforcements, especially his Gallic cavalry, giving him the ability to regain control of the situation. With Caesar gaining the initiative, many local tribes started supporting Caesar, giving him much needed grain and other supplies, as well as swelling his auxiliary ranks. Afrianus then made the decision to retreat and to further Spain, hoping to link up with Varus' two legions. Both sides jockeyed back and forth until the only way south was through a mountain pass. Both armies raced for the pass, and with Caesar's cavalry harassing the Pompeian troops, Caesar was able to reach the mountain pass first, blocking Afrianus' escape. Caesar held Afrianus in between two armies. An effective pincer movement would seal a victory for Caesar. At this point, men from both sides started conversating at the river, discussing many things, old friends getting reacquainted. Some of Afrianus' men even spoke to Caesar personally. Petreius ordered all fraternizing to stop, and any Caesar's men in his camp were to be executed, thus stopping the peaceful melee between men. Petreius then tried to retreat back to Ilisda, though being effectively surrounded by Caesar's forces, Petreius and Afrianus decided to surrender. Caesar then promised leniency to both men and their army as long as they lay down and totally surrendered, and promised not to take up arms against him again. Caesar then took his 10th and 7th legions to confront Varro, but soon afterward, one of Varro's legions mutinied, and the locals shut him out of the local towns, thus forcing Varro to surrender. Caesar left Cassius Longinus in charge as governor of Spain with 4 legions, the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. Caesar's next goal was to backtrack to Massilia to help Trebonius finish the siege there. Brutus finally sealed a naval victory against the Massilian fleet, mostly townsfolk, whom Caesar commended for their bravery in battle. Thus, Caesar focused on the ground assault, building a 6-story tower which had a roof-like structure from the tower to the walls, where engineers undermined the wall, weakening it, forcing the Massilians to surrender, but it was a ruse, and the Massilians burned the tower, but to no avail. With no navy and having no way to get supplies, disease spreading through the city, and to make matters worse, Caesar had just arrived with 2 more legions, finally forced the Massilians to surrender. But Ahibarbarus, leader of the Massilian forces, escaped by sea, living to fight another day. Caesar had taken Spain. His legates had taken Sicily and Sardinia and were preparing to sail to North Africa, while Caesar now was preparing to head east towards Greece, Pompey's power base. The North African campaign was a total disaster for Caesar, his man Curio having been routed and killed, a total loss. Caesar was back in Brundisium, preparing to head east to confront Pompey. Pompey's army was now some 60,000 legionaries strong, 9 full legions, 4,000 archers and slingers, 7,000 cavalry, plus auxiliary. But only 4 of Pompey's legions were veteran. The others were newly formed. The bulk of his force was raw recruits. Caesar had 10 under-strength, though veteran legions, plus 2 newly formed legions. Caesar's path to Greece was a dangerous one, the Adriatic Sea being guarded by Pompey's huge naval force led by Bibulus. Caesar had one advantage, though. The Roman calendar had to be adjusted frequently by the Pontifex Maximus, who was Caesar at the time, and he knew it was late autumn. But Bibulus thought it was winter, keeping his ships at port, thinking Caesar would wait for spring. Caesar set sail with 7 legions, having landed before Bibulus had found out about it. Bibulus did manage to destroy 30 of Caesar's ships on the return voyage, delaying Caesar's other legions from joining him in Greece. This will be continued in the next installment. I'm Big Duke 6 at CoolKegs Studios, and I ask you please subscribe, hit the noti bell, like, hell, even comment. And thanks to all friends and family supporting us. We couldn't do this without you. And remember, people, Civis Pacem Parabellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. This was my Caesar's Civil War Part 1.